Hey guys, Mr. Wheeler here. This video is on biodiversity. Biodiversity is a term that is short for biological diversity, and it corresponds to the number of different species in a given area. In terms of Earth's biodiversity, there's about 1.9 million known species, most of which are insects, and there's an estimated 9 million species. So that means we know only about 20% of all species on Earth as an estimate. A species is considered known after it's been scientifically attributed. So you can see that if you look at this chart, where there is orange, that is the portion of the species that we have classified, and when there's yellow, that's the estimated additional types of species are within that category that we do not know. In terms of describing diversity, there are 3 different levels. There's species diversity. This is the number of different species in an area. There's ecosystem diversity. This is the variety of habitats, communities, and ecological processes in an area. There's genetic diversity, which is a variety of gene types in a population, where a gene is a piece of DNA code that can be inherited. Whenever we're just using the term biodiversity, we're usually talking about this first one, and that's the species diversity, the number of different species in that area. When we're talking about the species diversity, there are some species that play a bigger role in an ecosystem than other species will. For example, the sea otter of North America is an example of one of these keystone species. And for a healthy biodiverse ecosystem to function, it has to have balanced cycles of energy and nutrients. It has to have ecosystem stability. And what these keystone species are is they're species that they're critical to the functioning of the ecosystem. For this example, sea otters eat urchins, and so if these urchins go unchecked, they can actually decimate the ecosystem in which they live in. So sea urchins and sea otters, they live in the aquatic biome, the kelp forest. And so if those sea otters are hunted for their fur and they're not around to eat the urchins, well, the urchins will actually decimate the kelp forest and eat all the kelp. And so this is what an urchin flat would look like. So this is an area where the urchins have decimated the kelp forest and there's no kelp left. This is a healthy kelp forest. In terms of the biodiversity present in an ecosystem, it's important that the ecosystem or the populations within the ecosystems have high genetic diversity, because this allows for the populations to survive diseases and environmental changes. And so what this graphic shows is the bottleneck effect. And so what the bottleneck effect is it's a decrease in genetic diversity due to a population crash. And so what happens is the population will have high genetic diversity prior to the population crash, shown on the left, and then after the population crash, after something has happened to that population, the genetic diversity will be decreased. And what that does is it puts the population at risk for its genetic disorders, and it's more susceptible to going extinct. A lot of biodiversity is important to humans as well, because we use biodiversity for a lot of things. One thing that we use it for is in the medical industry. So 74% of all prescription drugs in the United States are derived from plants. Chemical and materials may be developed from chemicals in all kinds of species. And so here is a table that shows just a few examples of common medicines. And so some things that you might recognize: cortisone, cocaine, there's L-Dopa, which is used for Parkinson's disease. Those are all common medicines derived from plants, which is an important reason why we need to preserve biodiversity. Additionally, we use biodiversity for food. So this table shows the origins of a lot of common foods, what areas of the world they originated from. Most crops originate from areas of high diversity, and what we do is we hybridize the crops for different enhancements, whether it's so that they have better yields or they're resistant to diseases. And so hybrids, they're crops developed by combining genetic material from more than one population. Over time, humans have hybridized a lot of our foods, fruits and vegetables. And one example that I like, NPR did a story years ago about how still lifes from the 17th century show how different watermelons were when they were painted back in the 1600s. And so you can see, if you look closely at these watermelons shown in this painting, you can see they don't look like watermelons of today. They are segmented much similar to a citrus. The seeds are very large. The outside of the watermelons looks more like a pumpkin. And so here's another image. You can also see the segmenting of the watermelon in this picture. This is just one of hundreds or even thousands of examples of ways that we've hybridized food. Biodiversity is also important for ethics, aesthetics, and recreation. And so it goes beyond medical, industrial, and agricultural importance. For ethical reasons, it's important to preserve biodiversity because species and ecosystems have a right to exist despite other values. Also, people should preserve biodiversity for their personal enjoyment. Keeping pets, camping, photography, wildlife watching, etc. Those are all reasons why an individual may want to preserve biodiversity. There is a term that we use called ecotourism that describes a form of tourism that supports the conservation and sustainable development of ecologically unique areas. And so when people are visiting state parks and national parks, they are pursuing this idea of ecotourism.